Okay, with that, I will start our discussion today. Welcome, everyone. Very glad you're with us. And I have a good amount of stuff to share with you. And I'll share you a little bit about the process I went through in order to get to where I am today. On the screen now, you can see what the system looks like today when you go sign into your account. Some of you are real regular users, so you've probably already seen it. We have put a request here in this orange background window here. We put a request for everybody to take a consideration of giving us a little bit of help, a little bit of a boost. We have an enormous amount of capabilities and data that we could be working on and making the system grow. And if we could get some of you to maybe offer to do a testimonial, that would help us a lot because it helps us encourage additional folks to join in and take advantage of this, which gives us the resources we need to keep growing and keep making the system more and more robust for you and everyone else. So if you would be interested in our indicators, that's not a bad idea. If you are interested in being one of those people who will be willing to give us a testimonial, we could record a video, or we could just take some words down and use your words as text. They would be very, very helpful to us, and we'd be most appreciative of that. That's what that red window is all about. But I think some of you are here today because you are regulars and you want to hear me talk a little bit about where we are with the RE indicator system and where it's going, and you want to hear a little bit where the economy is and where I think it might be going and what markets we should be looking at. So I hope to deliver on all those fronts today. I'm going to close these windows and I'm going to start off by drawing on our whiteboard here the syndicators. That's also clever because of a lot of us using syndication to get our work done. I'm going to draw a shape on our screen here. Turn whiteboard on. Again, flying a little bit differently today since I'm flying solo today. So please bear with me as I kind of go back and forth between the technology and our conversation. Now that's a really weird looking symbol. I don't know any alphabet very well, aside from those that use the letters in the English alphabet. I don't know any other alphabets that use other symbols. Maybe somebody in the group does. That is the new shape that people are using to describe the economic status, if you will. We were coming in, actually we were starting to soften a little bit in February. We already knew that we had some issues with the economy having already gone through 10 years plus of growth, 10 and a half years of growth. So February was starting to show some softness. And then we basically went off a cliff into March and April. And we started to come out of it in May and June. I'm going to give you some really interesting ideas about that in just a little bit. So you show you some tables I've put together. And now we're starting to flatten off. And we really don't know. So basically this is in March and April. And then, May and June. And we're in here. We don't know yet because the data needs to come in for July for us to see whether or not we have gone down again or we continue to putter along. My suspicion is with the unemployment counts up last week that we're probably going to see a softening of this again. But anyway, if anybody knows what shape this is from another alphabet, we could use that. It's not a Nike swoosh. It's not really a backward square root, but sort of. That's the nature of the economy. I have a comment here from Harold. I just bought our indicator this week. How do I save an address to a folder? Brilliant question, Harold. I promise you I will walk you through that on this webinar. That's a really great way to get introduced to the system, and welcome. And thank you so much for joining us. And please, everyone, keep asking questions. I may not notice them immediately, but I'm going to look at everything everybody says. All right. So what I was saying about the nature of the economy right now is it's entered yet another phase, if you will, of uncertainty. In fact, the phrase I heard was spoken by somebody who is either currently at or recently at the Federal Reserve Bank here in Washington. They termed it a thick fog of uncertainty. And they said that there is certainly downside risk were the words they used. And that downside risk was really dominating how we're looking forward into the future. So we are definitely looking at still the rocky shores that I have been discussing with each of you on these discussions since we began the webinar series. But I'd like to remind everyone, this is one of the best times ever, really, when we're towards the bottom of an economy to get in and get moving and acquire properties, because values and prices and cap rates are all going to start to go down, and sellers are going to be more interested in selling. So kudos on you for being here and being in the game, because this is the best time to be in the game. It's the easiest time to be in the game because you're going to be one of few who bother to go forward and do things. Okay. What I'd like to share with you is what I've learned about what some of the markets are doing right now and what I've been doing with markets that are going to help us, not just today, not just this quarter and through this recession, but actually sort of a long-term with the system as well. I'm really excited that in the process of trying to answer and provide the data that I've mentioned before, which is, can I give you a set of markets that have the highest likelihood of being strong coming out of a recession? Which markets are the first ones out of the gate to grow? And I've been working on this for actually over a year. And in the course of really pushing hard on it in the last couple of weeks, I have actually been able to expand the data that I'm working on. Both the depth and the quality of it are greatly enhanced because I've got more data points, I've got more data sources, and from now on, excuse me, I will have the ability to look not at the 385 markets that we've all been getting used to, but an additional several dozen overlay markets. So markets that are too big, we can start seeing what's going on inside it. So not just Dallas, Fort Worth, but what's going on in Dallas and what's going on separately in Fort Worth. And there are a number of markets that we have that capability. And there's even some areas where there's just individual counties that have been pulled out and counted separately. So I'm very excited that we're going to have a much clearer view. It's going to be a lot easier for me to produce and distribute this data to you quickly. I'm almost at the end of that process. And one of the tasks that I did in processing it and getting it to the point where I was in command of all of these new capabilities is I went and I took a side route to find out what's happened with the economy this year. So in review, everyone notices on this chart here that I've drawn, this sketchy chart, we were in January doing pretty well. In February, we started to slide, and then we went off a cliff in March and April. We did come up the other side a little bit. Now, this is not to scale. In fact, if you want to just look at it from a jobs perspective, we lost 22.2 million jobs when we fell in March and April. We've only gained back about 7.5 million as of June. Now, realize we may have lost some since because unemployment is definitely, the claims, the weekly claims are up. So what I noticed was that in the first full month of COVID-19 recession, all by itself, which I'm referring to as March, the average metropolitan area, the average of the 437 locales that I explore was negative 0.5% job growth. Not very good. About 60 to 70% of the markets, I haven't got a final count yet because it's a lot of sorting to get to that number, hadn't recorded losses. Some were flat and others actually were still gaining a little bit in March. Because remember, in March, we really didn't try to do a lot of our shutdown procedures until the middle of the month. So it really took a while for that to have an effect on things, and it wasn't nearly as big. And only 60 to 70% of the markets had recorded a loss. In April, of the 437 markets, 437 of them had losses. Every single one lost jobs. The average market loss was 12.8%. That's colossal. That's really huge. We could go on and on about what that 12.8% means, what it includes, what it may not include. It's just a number we can use to help compare things. It's one of the worst we've ever seen. It's definitely worse than we saw in 2008, 2009 during that recession. So how do the markets themselves compare which are the good ones and which are the ones that are struggling more? So what I'm going to do now, if you'll just give me a little moment here, for those who've joined since I last noticed, I see a number of people jumped on the call. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to pop my screen share to a different view. I'm going to try to do it from the entire screen. And I'm going to put this, if you'll just bear with me. Again, I don't have my second person here. I am flying solo today, so it's not as easy for me to do all this because I'm looking at three things at once. So let me try this. Show Let's see, why is that not showing? I practiced this before we had the live connection here. So let's do application window. Let's do preview, share. I hope people can see that. I don't think they can. Let's turn that off. Turn the squiggly off. I think you just see me now. Let's try screen share again. Oh, technology. Even when you practice, it's not enough. Share. Is it there now? I don't think you're seeing that. Oh, isn't that a bummer? Give me a few moments here, folks. I apologize for taking some of your time to not have this sorted out for everybody. It was working before I went on the call live, but share your entire screen. Let's try screen 2. Let's try screen 1, actually. Let's share that. I think I've got it. I think I've got it. Let's see if this works. All right. I think that's working. I think that's going to work. Share the screen. Screen 1. Share. Is it share? It's not letting me share the screen. That's so bizarre because it tells me I'm going to share a screen and then it won't do it. Chrome tab. Oh gosh, folks. It's really a bunch of good data here. Let's try this. Share. Isn't that really weird? It's not letting me go into the share screen mode. Entire screen. I'm clicking on it. Let's try to put this away. Let's put this away. Oh, shucks. Let's try this. Oh, I see. Okay. No, it's not letting me share the preview. Huh, that's really bizarre. Well, you know, technology is the way it is. Give me another 30 seconds, and if it doesn't work, I'll just have to report it to you verbally. If that's just how life goes, that's how it goes. This has not happened before. We've had some really good webinars in a row here. Let's see if that's going to do it. Let's do share screen 2. Share entire screen. It's just not letting me share screen. Bummer, folks. Really disappointed because I spent a lot of time getting this file ready for you all. There's no way that I can get this to work. Isn't that bizarre? I have one more idea. Maybe this will work. Maybe copy paste. It will not let me copy paste. There's a screen share button on here, and it's worked on every other thing I've ever tried to do before. And it's worked when I did it, and it's even showing me that the preview screen is open, and it's just not letting it come up on the screen. Oh, that's too bad. I'm going to abandon that, at least talk to you about what I see in this report. This preliminary data anyway, so I think some of you might have been encouraged to try to take a snapshot of it with your screen, and it's preliminary data. So let me tell you what I've discovered. I ranked the markets with their gains and losses in the February, March, April, May, June. I went through carefully looking at every market, and I categorized them. And here are the markets that had the biggest losses between March and April. Remember, in March, 60-70% of markets were down. In April, 100% of the markets were down. So everybody recorded a loss. Who recorded the deepest losses? The first on that list was Atlantic City. And that's not a surprise because it's tourism related in so many ways. The second on the list was Norwich, New London, Westerly, Rhode Island. For those of you who are in the Northeast, you know Norwich and New London are largely a military and small market. It's not surprising to see that. Third one on the list is the non-Honolulu, Hawaii. It's basically Maui. That was down, tourism, people not flying. Number 4, Myrtle Beach, tourism. Number 5, Flint, Michigan. Not surprised there because also on this list in Michigan, number 8 was Warren and Farmington Hills. Number 9, Jackson. Number 10, Detroit. Number 11, Battle Creek, Michigan. Number 13, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Really tough on Michigan. This has been really, really hard on Michigan. Remember, this is the early days. This was before there were large numbers of coronavirus being reported in Florida and Arizona and California and much of the South and the West. So this was the early days. And Atlantic City was down 33%. That's way beyond anything ever recorded during the Great Depression. The other ones that are on this list that I didn't mention because I just skipped over them is Barnstable, which is essentially Cape Cod, Ocean City, New Jersey, which is tourism. Those are both tourism related. Las Vegas was number 12, tourism related. I think a lot of the Michigan was car factories shutting down and part suppliers shutting down. Number 15 is Bowling Green, Kentucky. And some of you are going, why Bowling Green, Kentucky? Well, they make the Corvette there. So there's already, I know, a big factory that came to a halt. Huge losses in these markets. So the theme in this and the big loss is probably tourism and automobile manufacturing took the biggest hits. Now, which ones had the least loss? The market that had the least downturn was only down 3.8%. Was a market here in Virginia, in Western Shenandoah Valley, Staunton, Waynesboro was the least, followed by Sherman, Denison, Texas, Enid, Oklahoma, Idaho Falls, Idaho, Ogden, Clearfield, Utah, Sebring, Florida, excuse me, I'm looking at too many rows ahead, Cheyenne, Wyoming. I could read this list, but the point is they're all really small markets in the South and the West, and they didn't get exposed yet to the virus's full impact in March and April. It was interesting to me on this list that number 15 was Boulder, Colorado, only down 7.4%. So there's a theme in this that's not necessarily employment specific, but it's distance from the epicenters. Detroit got hit very hard with the virus up front. So did New York in terms of counts and cases. And therefore, it's not surprising that we have those numbers in Michigan. It's also not surprising that the car industry and the tourism industries got hit very badly at the beginning. And we didn't see it ripple through yet. By the way, the villages, some of you might follow the villages. You might have some parents or grandparents who live down in the villages. In Florida, they were on the list, the 9th least affected in terms of growth. We're looking at job growth specifically. We're not trying to track population at this point because people aren't really moving. So let's take a look now at those markets that recorded the best gains as we went into May and June, because as I was describing to you earlier, we did have that upswing. We came back. We were recording a little bit of an improvement in how things were going. And what that means is that markets that had shut down because the whole country took that pause, that breather, I think it was 45 days, essentially, that we were all kind of on a breather. In May, we started to open up again. We tried to get things going in certain markets, particularly in the South and the Southwest. And here are the markets that jumped, were able to surge forward in May and June. Leading the pack was Myrtle Beach, which had been hit very hard. They were up 18%. Ames, Iowa, Norwich, New London, and then that's in Connecticut, Western and Rhode Island, came back. Flint was coming back. Kokomo, Indiana was coming back. Grand Rapids was starting to improve. Warren, Farmington Hills was coming back. Jackson, Michigan also coming back. So Detroit, I'm going down this list, Kalamazoo, Midland, Michigan, they all were starting to have a sort of a healthier, starting to get their legs back and do better. That shows us that the shutdown has a major effect on the economies, particularly where they're manufacturing cars and where tourism is a big effect. Now, tourism is going to have a really long recovery time. Markets that get hit because of tourism, such as Las Vegas and Orlando, for example, rely on national and international travel. Myrtle Beach, it's a lot of regional people, a lot of people from DC and Atlanta and just generally speaking, the Carolinas and where you can drive to, Pennsylvania, Delaware, they go to Myrtle Beach. You're able to draw in without flying in. They're not as dependent on the traveler by airplane nearly as much as in Orlando or Las Vegas. So it's not surprising that Myrtle Beach had a chance to claw its way back a little bit. Now, the markets that did not come back, the ones that had the softest recovery, Yuba City, California, rather small town, not much to say there. Midland, Texas, we still have the problem with the energy production. Demand for energy is way down. I'd be concerned about investing in markets that are dependent on energy. There's still a lot of uncertainty there. Ocean City, New Jersey, the tourism, actually, very interestingly, they also are very dependent on tourism that's local. But I think the New Yorkers got hit so hard. They were a lot more, New Yorkers and New Jersey people, Pennsylvania people were a lot more skittish about traveling and being around other people. So it doesn't surprise me that that market did not do very well, where Myrtle Beach could. Orlando, least gain, and was actually still down. These are the markets that had the smallest gains. In fact, Yuba City, Midland, Texas, Ocean City, New Jersey, Orlando, Madera, California, Corvallis, Oregon, Farmington, New Mexico, Eden, Oklahoma, and California, Lexington Park, which is part of the DC metropolitan complex. They all still were losing jobs, still losing. So even when things had turned the corner for a lot of markets, there were some that were still losing. Roughly 0% or 0.5% growth or the Maui market, Pittsfield in Mass, Baltimore, Anniston in Alabama, Roanoke in Virginia, and New Bern in North Carolina. So what's really fascinating about this is that even when things were getting better, many markets, especially the smaller ones, were still struggling. They were not growing very well. They barely, some of them barely held on. Some of them even continued to lose. It's really important for us to keep tab on this. It's underscoring the things that we want to keep in our minds about where we might want to be going if we were looking for acquisitions. On the one hand, you might have more aggressive sellers, more willing to deal sellers in some of these smaller markets because they're much more likely to feel the downward effect. But stepping back at the national stage now, think for a little bit about how the unemployment plan that's been in place, where each person who's on unemployment gets their state issued check plus a bonus of $600 every week. That expires at the end of this week, essentially today. So that means that folks who have been living on that, people who have lost their jobs, some lost their jobs, were hired back, went to work at retail outlets, went to work at bars and restaurants, went to work at hotels. They're losing their jobs again. They're not going to have this to fall back on. Not only have they maybe lost their job, but now this fallback to pay their rent, to pay their insurance, to pay their medicine, to pay for their food, to keep gas in the car, to take care of the kids. They're not going to have that to count on anymore, at least for now. And we don't know if they'll ever do anything more. There's all kinds of speculation about what the Congress is going to potentially come out with. It will certainly not be in place for next Friday's end of the week and payments that go out the following week. You're gonna see some differences. So for those of you who own buildings at this point, if you own properties, you're definitely going to want to be much more keep your thumb on it. You may have had some pretty good collections in March and April and May and June and July because the money's been coming in as a result of being supported through the federal and state unemployment practices. That may change. So you want to watch the news for that, or I'll watch the news for you and come back here in 2 weeks. I'll tell you where we're at. It's pure speculation at this point. No point in us taking time to speculate like that. It's not what we want to do here. We want to look at the fundamentals. We want to look at the trends. And right now, the trend is sideways to possibly downwards. Just read a very skeptical, not cheery, not rosy, not optimistic outlook piece that talked about a variety of data points and a variety of economists and projections and numbers and all kinds of stuff that puts a cloud over things right through the fall and the winter. That's going to happen? Don't know. But generally we know we're in a bumpy, rocky spot. Prices are probably going to become more to your favor. So sharpen your skills, get on the phone, talk to brokers, find out what's going on, do your underwriting, keep looking for those cap rates to be more favorable. Be cautious with your purchases. Favor the markets that aren't as risk exposed. The ones that have more diverse economies that aren't going to suffer from long-term hesitation for people to travel and tourism or retirement. But the other thing on the flip side of this is I've heard a very commonly quoted or misquoted Warren Buffett idea of be fearful when people are greedy and be greedy when people are fearful. I suggest now that a lot of people are very fearful. So this is the time to kind of go out there and collect the acorns and get ready to plant some new trees and make the most you can of this. If you're a savvy and smart person with a good heart, you as an operator of an apartment complex would potentially even put them in a better position than they're in now, because the current operator may not be putting the time, the attention, or the knowledge into making it so that the place is well maintained. So I encourage you to maybe think about how you'll be doing good for people as well, both the seller as well as the tenants that you would be inheriting. So we lost a total of 22.2 million jobs. And then that was in the 2 months where we were on the downwards spiral. We gained 7.5 million of them back, as well. That was through June. Those are preliminary June numbers. We do have revised June numbers, and soon July numbers will be out in early August. So I will refresh this list and we can discuss it, and I'll make sure it's viewable with everybody on the screen. I'll make sure that this utility doesn't foul me up again. So with that, what I'd like to do is do the little walkthrough of two things. I had one of our regulars on the webinar. He has given me a question about something we discussed in the last webinar, which is about the ring studies and how to make good use of it. And the other thing is we wanted to discuss a little bit about how to do an actual lookup and how to save it into a folder. So why don't I bring that back up again here and turn that back on. Give me all a moment to turn this off. I know some of you probably want that list that I just called off. You can't write it quickly. You could watch the webinar and we post it again online, but they're all really preliminary, and really what you're looking and listening for entirely is the themes that you're discovering in it. That's the more important thing than anything. So I encourage you to not worry about each individual market and instead focus a lot on what it means overall and where you should be focusing. So I'm going to log in right now to my RE Indicator account and allow us to discuss how to save a point, how to save it into a folder, and how to take advantage of those rings, because that's what people have been asking about. All right, I got that up there. And then where did it go? Let's put this over here. It's fun doing this by myself. Not as easy. I got to tell you, it's just not as easy. Let's share. Yeah, this share function is just no longer really happy at all. I wonder why. Let's try that. Share. There we go. Everybody smile, please. It's almost like I want to applaud, because it's been frustrating on this end to not give you exactly what I was planning to do. All right, so here we have signed into an account for you so that you can watch me as I go through using the system. And the first question that I want to address is when we save a location. There's several points we want to make about that. By the way, for those of you who have just noticed these pop-ups, we're going to try to keep you informed as much as we can. And with messages that we want to give you access to, like, I don't have time to watch that video now, just ignore it. Press the box up here, the little X to close it. You could also click on watch later. But if you press skip, it will not ask you again in the future. If you've already watched the video, you don't need to see it anymore. By the way, you can watch these videos in the webinar replays tab up here at the top of the screen. They're loaded for you. So you can press these buttons here and they will go away. And here we are. So we are now looking at a location. Let's put an address and let's save it to a folder. So I'm going to put an address of a place that I used to live. 20191. Isn't that a great number? Cape. You see, as I type it, it is trying to find a match. Coral, there it is, Lane in Huntington Beach. I was a resident here back when I lived in California and really loved the location. And so this map has been drawn and it shows all of the points around it. Now, when I go back to this screen here and I put it in here, let's say I want to give it their address, and then I want to say, let's say apartment, right? Now, before you go any further, before saving it, if you have already created a folder, you could choose from the folders that you've created where you'd like it to go. Now, if you don't choose a folder, it will automatically, by default, go in your unsorted folder. We keep a folder for unsorted as a place to dump any one of the points that you create, the locations that you create, that you did not tell it what folder to put it into. If you have a new site, a new place that you want to look up, and you're trying to sort a whole new market, you're doing something completely new, you can press this plus button here over the size of a folder. It's going to add a folder. It's going to bring you into your settings. And in here, as you can see, we have a view of a function to add a folder. Right up here, it says add folder. Let's call it OC for Orange County, okay? Because that's where that was. It was in Orange County. You can call it anything you want. By the way, if you want to change the name of a folder later on, you can. If you want to move points into it or out of it, you can. I'll show you all that in a little bit. You can delete a folder. I'll show you all those things because it's been something that a couple of folks have been asking about. So I'm going to save my folder there. Bingo. We now have it saved. And I can go back to my map in the upper right, my icon to go to my map. And you'll see now that when we have this site, I'm not checking these off because I often use this account to demonstrate for people who are new and I want to show them how those work. So this folder now has been added into my locations. You can see now when I go to give this a folder, that OC is now on the list. It was not before. So I can tell it, put it in OC, and then say save location. And there it is. Again, these will just keep popping up on our conversation today because I like to have them available when I do tours for those who need some assistance when they have questions and we're doing a live discussion or trying to sort something out together. All right, so now if I wanted to move that, let's just say I no longer want it in my OC folder. I want it in another folder. I go into my OC folder and my Orange County folder, there it is. It's the apartment one that I saved, right? And I can go into my folder icon. You can see that. I don't know if you can see that because I see now that my viewer here, I'm going to change that. I'm going to change my settings so you can see what's going on over here. Let's try that. Let's try this one up here. I'm going to get me out of the way. I think that'll get me out of the way for the moment. You can see now that I have a folder, and this folder icon, when I click on this folder icon right here, it opens up a list of all the available folders. And you can just scroll and choose the one that you want. I want to move it maybe to the DC folder. Obviously, that wouldn't be a smart thing to do because it's not in DC. But it shows you that if you click on it, you chose a different folder for it. Let me pop these out of the way for you. I need to create an account for our webinars so that I don't have to keep doing that for everybody. Now, when I go into the DC folder, you can see we've moved the Cape Coral Lane property location into the folder. There is actually another way to do that. Inside of settings, which is your gear in the upper right, you can go into your folders and your locations. So underneath folders, you can go into your folders here, and we could take, for example, the OC folder right here, and then we could say, I don't like OC anymore. I want it to be Orange County, and we can change the name of the folder and have it be whatever we want. We can do a save on that, and then from now on, instead of it being OC, it'll be Orange County. We can also go back to our settings. Let's go. You can see in the upper left here, I'm clicking back on map settings. I can go back into my locations. And inside here, instead of it saying the address, by mistake, I put it in as an address. I can click on that, and then I can edit what I have as my title. My location can now be apartment OC, and then I can save it. And then see that I've given it a different label. I can even, when I'm inside of that, choose a different kind of color marker to go with it. As you know, there's different colors, and you can create your own ones. That's all. We'll all talk for another day, but there's a lot of little features in there. You pretty much can't break the system. We've tried to make it error-proof. So a lot of this stuff is intuitive, and you'll be able to sort of teach yourself and guide yourself through it, and you'll probably figure it out as you go. But now that you know what's possible, it might be a lot easier for you all to experiment and make things go exactly as you want, and store what you want, where you want, how you want them stored. So I'm going to come back over here and take a look at my settings and put me in the lower right again. And I do that by clicking there. No. All right. Come on. Not letting me do the lower right. There we are. Got it. Let's try that one. Okay. And let me see if there are any. Oh, I did have another question I wanted to address, which was about how the rings work. Let's go back to our OC apartment, because I want to show you how the rings work and how useful those can be. So I'm going to go back into I think I still have it in DC, the OC apartment. There it is. I'm going to open this particular location by clicking on it. Now, while this is open, I'm turning on my rings, the bullseye looking symbol to the right. Remember now, we've got to stay on this particular line. We can't address it on another property. We're going to do it on this location. I'm going to click on the rings, and I'm going to ask it to draw a 1 mile ring. And then I'm going to click on the rings. I'm going to ask it to draw a 3 mile ring. These are on off. So if you want to turn the 1 off, you click on it again, and you click on the 1 and it goes away. And then you can click on that and bring the 5 mile rings in. Now, a lot of times what I do, for a lot of the work that I do, I'm just using the 5 mile rings. This is the thing I use the most. And the reason why I use it the most, because I'm using it more often than not right now. I'm looking at the comps, the sales comps, and even more importantly, the rental comps that the brokers have provided me. So what you could do at this point, I should have thought about creating a little tutorial on this. And maybe what I'll do is I'll create a little how-to video on this as well, kind of a walkthrough. But the idea would be that if you had another address from a broker for a second or third or fourth location, because they are the addresses that they provide you in the OM, they give you the address of the rental comps or the sales comps sometimes, you can then put that in as a location. And with this 5 mile ring on, or the 1 or 3, you can figure out whether it's really close to your property or not. And what you'll see sometimes is the properties that you're looking at might be in, let's say you're getting a lot of, the property you're looking at is up here in the green as you go like between Westminster and Santa Ana, as you're in this area. Let's say you're looking at a property here in Southern Garden Grove. You would potentially be getting properties that the broker is suggesting that you compare with. And they could be outside the 5 mile ring, and they could be in the A and B areas that are outside the 5 mile ring to give you maybe a slightly more sugar-coated view of what your rental upsides could be. Now, remember now, we are oftentimes thinking about organic rent increases as well as value add forced rent increases and management rent increases. At this time, I don't see how we can do a whole lot of organic rent increases. There could be some properties out there that they haven't raised the rents up to market value, but now would be a tough time to actually ask anyone for more money. But certainly not the current tenants, maybe the new ones. As people vacate, you might be able to push organic rent increases to market. Very hard to force your values on the value add because you're really not sure how much to spend on those value adds. But you might be able to do some management bottom line improvements. So they're not going to be dollar per door increases, but you might be able to get a better cash on cash and a better return out of the property by getting your NOI in a better line, because you're more knowledgeable and you're bringing on a better team to manage the asset, which would allow you to see better returns in the current owner. But if you're looking at the rental comps and they're 7 and 8 miles away and they're not even in the same kind of area, they're like this one here, this property I'm looking at right here, which is where I used to live. It's in an A neighborhood. There's a lot of B around it. My suspicion is that some of these Bs have turned to As since this data was cut. I'm doing the new cut right now. I'm very excited. I also would even be suspicious in a positive way that some of this green will turn to yellow. This area is doing very well. This blue has probably been upgraded to a green. My guess, it's just a guess based on what I've seen there last time I visited in person. So areas go through very, very slow transitions. And we want to make sure that if you're looking at an area like this, that you're not too concerned about there being one cell of blue nearby, that you've got a lot of orange and yellow. If you're fairly solid in this area, that would be a great asset to acquire, especially if it were currently in more of a B- or C+, and you could enhance its value. But as we go through the next 3 to 6 to 9 months or longer, don't know, we're not really looking to push values that way. We're not looking for those opportunities quite yet. We will certainly be when we get to the very bottom of all this and when we have the big surge that could last anywhere from 3 to 10 years of growth, you'll definitely have some opportunities to be very aggressive with that. So stay with us, stay tuned, because I'll keep giving you that insight. I would then, so to summarize, you would take the 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 properties that are given as the rental comps, and you'd put them all on a map. Maybe you choose a marker color that was all the same but different from the property you're looking at. So maybe the property you're looking at gets the gray, and all of the rental comps would get maybe greens, and all of the sales comps get blues. I think we have a fire truck going by here. I don't know how loud that's going to be for you all. I'm going to turn this off for a second. May everybody be safe and get the help they need. So we would be able to put them all in on this map and then know whether or not they're really, truly close by and really indicative of what we should be expecting to see in our marketplace. So I hope that helps give you some value for your new rings. We're very excited that we've added that to the system, and there are going to be more capabilities added that relate to that soon as well. Okay, so I have to scroll quite a bit here because I've got some feedback coming in. Harold, please let me know if I've answered your question about saving it to a folder carefully and thoroughly enough. I've got some questions here. Ken says the emerging markets features is still titled Emerging Markets 2019. Does that mean that the data is from last year, or when and how does the data get updated? Great question, Ken. The data is always going to be a rearview mirror. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this call, this webinar, I have, in the process of expanding and increasing our capabilities, I have gotten I've got several much more robust data sources that will help us improve our updates more frequently. As we go into summer and fall, I've got all the foundations put out, and I'm going to start releasing that data as I have been able to finish them, as I cut the data. So basically, it's a big soup of data, and I need to boil it and simmer it some, and then put it in serve it up to you in a bowl to kind of come up with a metaphor. I want to analyze it. I want to make sure that there's enough of this and not too much of that, so that it's not just all broth and it's not all just the stuff and there's no liquid. I want to make sure that the soup is well proportioned. That takes me some time, but we're going to be able to bring these updates to you more frequently than we have in the past. However, you've asked specifically about emerging markets, and very interestingly right now, even though you're seeing the 2019 emerging markets, what you're essentially seeing is a time of a bygone era, a bygone history in the rearview mirror, way in the back. That was the world of January and February of this year. And if you were making decisions in January and February, that was very helpful and useful information. A couple of themes in there, mostly smaller markets that you wouldn't want to buy in anyway. Why? Because when you go to sell, there aren't many buyers. Just think about that now. When you're out there looking, you may be a lot more equipped to find things than many other people. You might be a lot more trained to find things. I'm not saying don't buy in small markets. I'm just suggesting that if you do, you want to go in to markets that you maybe know very well, or that you want to retire there, or you live there, or you have reason to travel there all the time, and you don't mind owning it for more time than just an in and an out, entry, enhance, and escape. Your exit cannot be as easily controlled. You cannot just put it on the market like you can in the major metros and expect there to be enough tire kickers and the serious buyer and a closed deal in those smaller markets. That's just not how they operate, no matter what the economy is doing. So you have far fewer buyers. So if you can find one, get a good deal on it, operate it well, it fits all those other requirements, and you have no expectation of exiting on your time frame, but much longer. I mean, you can put it up for sale and sell it in a week, but you might take months or years to sell it because it's a smaller market. The other thing that was going on that map is it was reflecting that there were several markets, particularly bigger ones. Nashville is the one, I'm not even looking at the map right now. Nashville is the one that comes to mind right away. And Nashville is the market that got hot and kept going. It didn't stop. It was a nonstop growth market. So what that tells you is that maybe once the markets recover, that the markets that were strong before, that were actually emerging or past emerging, remember there's two categories on that map, that maybe those markets would get a chance to rekindle their strength. So maybe it's a bit of a suggestion to you, a hint about where you might want to go. If we have the data that we're looking at right now and what looks like we're going to see for the rest of this year, there won't be emerging markets next year because on a traditional bound. The traditional, most commonly kind of, especially in our community of RE mentor trained people, we want to see 2 years of growth or more. Well, if this year's a negative year, next year, we're looking back at this year and we're seeing negative. So no market could be emerging next year. We go into 2022, we might have had growth in 2021, but it's not 2 years yet. So it's going to be a while before the traditional model of emerging markets will come back into play. What's going to be a replacement for the time being is for you to watch the markets and the data that I'm going to have a bunch of stuff coming out this fall. Just stay with me. Tons of stuff coming out this fall and in the next couple of weeks and couple of months about which markets are more likely to recover, which ones had population growth. I could go on and on. There's a ton of stuff that we're going to do to try to get ahead of the classic definition of an emerging market. So for the time being, if we were to do a emerging markets 2020 map, it would have no markets. If we do one for 2021, it'll have no markets. 2022, we need 2 in a row, still no markets. So we're going to be putting in other measures, other ways to try to suss it out. And we will reveal them and explore them with you on webinars and make sure everybody's knowledgeable in that area. Emerging markets have a parallel, which is market cycles. They too will need to see dramatic changes or shifts. We're going to try to find them and see if we can find the markets that are beginning to advance out of one stage into another. And we will reactivate the market cycles module when that is possible as well. By the way, up here in the upper left, we've got the emerging markets in your system right now. This is the old one. I remind everybody on here, please take note of this if you haven't read it. It's basically a summary of what I've just said. We need to be further back than inside one tiny market to see if there's any variation anywhere near it. You can see that with San Diego and Riverside, San Bernardino, were long-term, multi-year. So the scale is dark green. It has 3 or more years of emerging status. Las Vegas, they were on fire. And then they recently emerged only 2 years, not 3, not 4, not 5, just 2. We had Prescott, Arizona had just popped. So this is a very insightful, it's also good for historical purposes. We'll always want to kind of remember what happens when we get to the end of an economic upturn, 5, 7, 9, 10, 12, 14, whenever years down the road, we have another downturn. This will help us see that, oh, we're getting a lot like that pattern we saw towards the end of the market upcycle. So it's going to be helpful to you all for the long term. Gene Allen, are the ABCD neighborhoods or specific multifamily addresses? The ABCD are specifically for the multifamilies. I'm going to make sure everyone's comfortable and familiar and knowledgeable in this topic. You will know the quality A, B, C, D of an individual asset on your own. When you look at the age of the property, when you look at its obsolescence or not obsolescence, the amenities, the rents that are being charged, how well it's maintained, you know a building's class. You decide that on your own. Your broker will probably help you with that, but they're going to be a little more generous with their scoring system. But don't we wish they were our teachers in school, huh? But what you have is a subjective, but generally easy to agree to. It's an A property, it's a B property, it's a C property, it's a D property. A lot of times what I do is I say D properties are ones that have dirt in the landscaping, and C properties are the ones that have crabgrass, and B properties are the ones that have blooms. They've got flowers that are very well tended, and A properties, you know, they're the fancy ones with the atriums and all the accoutrements. The fire pits are starting to get more common in the higher end B properties. What's missing from your analysis, from everybody's analysis, is a consistent, standardized way to help understand the neighborhoods that are around. So when we look at our tab here for micro neighborhoods, you can see there are thousands and thousands of them in the US. And these are almost block by block. And what it's trying to tell us is there's texture on the ground, that there are areas that are newer, more recently reinvested, and areas that are older and less recently reinvested. And these values of A, B, C, and D that are in this system here are only looking at data that reflects multifamily 5 units and larger. So you could go into an area here that is a C, a green, and find $1 million plus homes. It's not trying to characterize the homes as a collective. It's characterizing all of the multifamilies in that puzzle piece together and by themselves together as a collective. So if we go in here a little bit tighter, if we were to document all of the multifamilies that are inside this rectangular space where I used to live, and we were to look at them as a group and say, well, there's a 20 unit that's in poor repair and no amenities, but there's a 200 unit and a 312 unit and a 90 unit and a 40 unit that are all built in the last 5 or 7 years. As a group, the weighted average tips it to an A as a grouping. It doesn't say any individual property is an A, but the area of the neighborhood is an A. And by the way, there's C across the street. There's a lot of B to the south and to the east and to the west. It gives you that context to know how high you might be able to push a product or what kind of area you are really in. You can have an A multifamily in a D neighborhood. So for example, it's possible that you got a lot of properties in the northeast of this, the northwest, excuse me, of this D area. I'm just making up a story. You got a fair number of older, functionally obsolete, no new amenities, no new value add upgrades, nobody putting 6-panel doors in, nobody bothering with stainless steel appliances, bottom of the barrel kind of environment. But because of the A that's here and the new construction and the vitality of Beach Boulevard and all of the encouragement from the county to redevelop and enhance, somebody might have taken the jump and bought this corner lot, tear down the Wells Fargo Bank, and put up a 20-unit multifamily. It's possible. And that wouldn't be a bad thing necessarily in terms of how the data works, because it is not yet a preponderance of the properties in there. So you can't use this to eliminate looking at other information. It should help you eliminate looking at stuff that's a waste of your time. And then it helps you describe those opportunities to your partners and your sponsors. I hope, Jean Allen, I hope that was very helpful for you. And described that we are only looking at multifamilies 5 and more. I'm redoing the data for a release later this year, and it's going to do the same thing, 5 units and more. I've got all the data, and what's slowing me down on it is actually a real boon for you all. I've actually been able to find a way with what I've got to help us find emerging neighborhoods, which is on everybody's wish list. I did a poll on that. So I'm actually pushing it simultaneously to be a lot more efficient with my time. Okay, Harold, great. I'm glad to answer your question. Ken, got it. Good advice on knowing local market and or cautiousness in small markets. Very excited to see the data soup that when it's done. Yes, I am too. You know, it's been weird times. Sitting here in my home office all the time. Fortunately, I have a nice view out my window. There are people walking and jogging by, lots of dogs, kids in strollers. So I'm not completely isolated. Got great northern light. I've got my air conditioning. I'm not complaining, but you know what I noticed, which was really interesting, and I'm doing corrective measures, is I've been sitting so much that just standing and walking is starting to not feel good. So I'm starting to do more rigorous efforts to improve that. Some of you may be experiencing the same thing. I'm not commuting anymore. I'm not shopping in stores. I'm not traveling to see my family or my friends. So my body isn't getting the exercise and push that it needs. Interestingly, I'm an avid cyclist. And if you've been to a bike store lately or even Walmart, you'll notice the bikes are sold out. And what that means is a whole bunch of people who are not very good at bicycling are out on the bike trails. And it's very hard on us experienced bicyclists, because if they're not really comfortable with the rules of the road and bicycling, I'll just let them get a little better at it before I try to get out there at my normal biking hours. The weather is ghastly awful. We've had second longest heat wave we've ever had in DC. Now we're worse than that. It's much hotter. It's much more humid. So yeah, I'll wait for my biking for slightly better weather. So just thought to share that with you, since we're all pretty much just sitting at home or sitting in our home office. This is a great time to learn new tricks and skills, to sharpen your ability to process your underwriting opportunities, connect with your brokers, build those relationships. Check if you only have one underwriting to do, underwrite it all the way through, even if it's in a D neighborhood, because it'll teach you what a D property looks like with a D asset or a C asset in a D neighborhood. It'll show you on the numbers what it looks like. You'll start to get to know what that looks like. It's almost like you could underwrite it, and you could just take the numbers and underwrite it and be able to say this is a blank property in a blank neighborhood, because there are patterns to it. There are patterns, but you don't have to do that. You don't have to do all that memorizing. Just pop the address here to RE Indicator. Keep good folders. Keep your individual research in proper folders. Keep yourself organized. Throw out things that aren't going to be useful for you anymore, because you don't want to get the system so crowded that it feels like you have too much to look at. Keep it clean and simple. And what's coming ahead, we've got 3.1 is in the works. It should include hopefully the new markets anticipator, where we're trying to suggest which markets are the most likely to leave the recession the earliest. It may include a way to recharacterize our market cycles. If not, it will this fall. We are looking at several other really exciting functionalities that we'd like to build into the system. So that we're scheduling that for an August release. We don't know when in August. I don't like putting dates on things because I don't want to disappoint you. But a lot of times, if I don't feel the soup is right, I don't feel it's got the right proportion, and it's going to serve up properly, I won't give it to you, because I don't want you chasing after data or functionality that's not a good use of your time. So I'd rather make sure it's right and then get it to you than bring it to you and have to struggle with you all as things aren't what we had thought they were. Instead, we're going for quality all the time. So a couple of key points to summarize before we end for today. Number one, we definitely see probably months and many months of stagnation or decline. Number two, build your relationships. Be ready for when these prices are in a better place. Number three, look at finding out-of-state owners in your market that you live in, especially if it's a good market to be in overall, generally a more major primary or secondary market. You can always email support@RE Indicator. Please consider giving us a testimonial so we can keep growing the system faster, get more hands on deck, get more resources in hand, and get things to you in a more timely fashion. So testimonial would go a long way to help us do that. I'd appreciate that very much if you'd be willing to reach back. Stay safe, stay healthy, enjoy time with your family, be thankful and grateful for what we have, including a big open window of opportunity that many of us have really been looking forward to for our whole lives and building and preparing ourselves for our whole lives. Scott, how soon will this webinar be available to view? Great question, Mark. It's viewable as quickly as technology physically allows me to. As soon as we're done, it has to process a file, and then I have to download it, and then I have to edit it, and then process it, and upload it, and process the upload. So it's just, I wish it could be in the snap of a finger, but it usually takes several hours. I don't like going to bed on Friday nights after webinar days without it being online. So I do my very best to make these webinars available right here in the webinar replay button the night of the webinar. So when we're done. Looking ahead on the calendar, we are going to continue to go every other week as we go into August. We are definitely looking in August for everyone to have a chance maybe to send in questions, send in ideas. As you can see here, I click the webinar button. What it does is it opens a tab in your software, or changes what window you're looking at depending on what settings you have in your browser, whether it's to open a new tab or to go to a new location in the same window. And what it does here is pops you to the webinar replays at info.reindicator.com. They're all here. The whole history of them is here. It's taking a little long for my screen to share all that data with you, but there it is. They're all there. If you ever want to rewatch them, they're available for you. That's why we do it. And I was going to give you the dates in August if you want to put them on your calendar. We would be then having webinars on the 7th and the 21st of August. We'll also be putting out a request for people to let us know if there is a different day of the week or different time of day that would be much more favorable to folks. Since we can do recordings and post them to the website, people still have access, but a lot of times people like to ask live questions and get live demonstrations. So I'd be willing to consider, if I get a deluge of folks saying Fridays are really bad or needs to be a different time of day, I'd be willing to consider that possibility when we get to September. That's it. I'm very excited about what we're about to produce for you. Nose to the grindstone. I don't mind being here, sitting at my home office desk, because I'm building great stuff for RE Indicator to help all of you with your business. I'm delighted you could join me today. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to be with us. For all of you who've mentioned something or sent a question in on chat, I'm particularly appreciative of the feedback and the questions. They are what make the webinar possible. Thank you all very much. And again, enjoy time with your family this weekend. Stay healthy, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks on the 7th of August. And bye for now.